My name is Vanessa. I am 30 years old, a single mother in Austin, Texas, and classic cars have been my obsession since I could reach the workbench in my uncle's garage. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from. And if family has ever treated your things like community property, hit subscribe because this story will make your heart race. On Saturday mornings, other kids watched cartoons. I slipped into Uncle Daniel's one-car garage and breathed in the perfume that changed my life: gasoline, cold metal, and strong coffee. He would tip his cap, hand me a rag, and say that every engine has a voice if you learn how to listen. We practiced listening together to the tick of valves, the contented rumble after a tune, the stubborn silence that meant a mystery. He never talked to me like a child. He treated me like an apprentice. My mother preferred tutus and polite hobbies. When I came home streaked with grease, she sighed and told me I was making life harder than it had to be. My father shrugged. It did not matter. In that garage, I felt seen. I learned to read torque by feel, to thread a spark plug right, to keep my hands steady when everything else shook. The day Uncle Daniel rolled back a tarp and revealed a magazine photo of a 1970 Dodge Challenger RT in deep cherry red, something in me clicked into place. The long hood, the taut lines, the menace in its stance, it felt like a promise. Someday, he said, that one will be yours if you want it badly enough. I wanted it more than sleep. Years later, I held a different promise in my arms. My son, Liam. The first time I pushed his stroller past a row of cars at a weekend meet, he reached for the bright red models and made a delighted sound that told me my life had not ended. It had doubled. I worked, mothered, and saved. I packed leftovers for lunch and skipped every shiny new thing that did not get me closer to that car. People called it impractical. I called it a vow. A car like that was not a toy. It was a future I was building with my own hands and steady breath. One day I would slide a key into a Challenger and feel Uncle Daniel beside me. One day I would bring it home. I had no idea the greatest risk was not rust or thieves, but the people who raised me. And when I returned from a trip, they learned why I never break a promise. Working 2 jobs became my normal. By day, I analyzed numbers in a quiet office downtown, staring at glowing screens and forecasting profit curves. By night, I tied my hair back, slipped on an apron, and waited tables at a crowded diner off I-35. Some nights, I came home so tired I sat on the kitchen floor, shoes still on, while Liam curled against me with his homework. He never complained. He would just whisper, "One day, Mom, we'll ride your red rocket together." That simple faith gave me the strength to keep going. Money that other women my age spent on vacations or wardrobes, I funneled into one locked account. Birthdays, holidays, even the tax refund check. Every extra dollar landed in that account. Friends invited me on weekend trips, but I always said no. I had one dream and one dream only. After nearly 6 relentless years, the numbers finally matched. $78,000. Enough to buy the car that had lived in my imagination since childhood. A private seller in Arizona listed a 1970 Dodge Challenger RT, restored with breathtaking care. I still remember the first glimpse. Cherry red paint gleaming under desert sunlight, chrome bumpers polished until they shone like mirrors. When I touched the hood, it felt like touching a heartbeat. The drive back to Austin was a blur. I kept glancing in the rear view, half afraid the universe would snatch the car away before I made it home. When I pulled into my apartment lot, Liam ran downstairs barefoot, shouting so loudly the neighbors peeked out. "Mama, it's real! It's really yours!" He circled the car with wide eyes, then clambered into the passenger seat, hugging the worn leather like it was alive. I swear I heard Uncle Daniel's laugh in that moment, a ghost sitting quietly in the back seat. That Challenger became our family's jewel. We never drove it recklessly. Only perfect weather Sundays, top down, Liam's laughter mixing with the roar of the engine. I detailed it myself, waxed it until the paint looked wet. Other moms talked about shopping sprees or beach houses. My prize sat behind a locked garage door, proof that grit and sacrifice could make dreams tangible. At a classic car show in Austin, I met Ethan. He stood beside a nearly identical Challenger. His was a replica built in the early 2000s. We started talking, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. He understood immediately why Asara could hold so much soul. That shared language grew into something more. For 2 years, that car symbolized everything: my independence, my family, my connection to the past. I guarded it like treasure. I thought the worst danger was a careless driver or a storm. I never imagined the real threat lived inside my own bloodline. The promotion talk started casually, over coffee in the break room of the mid-sized investment firm where I worked. My supervisor, Marissa, leaned against the counter, her eyes sharp. "Vanessa, how's your passport situation?" she asked. I blinked. "Valid. Why?" She smiled in that way that meant a test was coming. "We've landed a huge client in London. They want someone who can handle complex negotiations and read the room. That's you. 2 weeks, maybe longer. You'd lead the presentation team." My heart thudded. 2 weeks in London was the kind of opportunity careers were built on. But immediately, another thought intruded. The Challenger, my red rocket. Austin had been hit by a wave of car thefts in the past 6 months. Even in secure garages, cars disappeared, chopped for parts. I couldn't leave my treasure unguarded for 2 whole weeks. That night, I sat across from Ethan at my kitchen table while Liam colored at the counter. "I don't trust leaving it in the apartment garage," I confessed. Ethan tapped his fingers thoughtfully. "What if we swapped? I'll store your Challenger at my friend's climate-controlled garage. You leave my replica with your parents. They won't know the difference, and no thief will bother with it." I hesitated, but it made sense. His replica looked almost identical from the outside. Same cherry paint, same silhouette. Only someone who knew cars inside out would notice the small details. 2 days before my flight, I drove down to San Antonio with Liam, the Challenger rumbling beneath us. My parents lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of neighborhood where retirees waved from porches and kids rode bikes past trimmed hedges. Safe, I thought. Safe enough. "Still hanging on to that thing?" my mother Lorraine said when I pulled into the driveway. Her lips curled in that familiar disapproval. "It's not a thing, Mom," I answered evenly. "It's my dream." My father, Gerald, gave a non-committal grunt from behind his newspaper, and then Madison, my younger sister, breezed in, tossing her hair. "You're really still obsessed with cars? God, Vanessa, grow up." At dinner, she whined about all her friends booking a Caribbean cruise. "It's not fair," she sighed. I work so hard and I'm stuck here. Everyone else is going to post pictures while I rot in Texas." Mom patted her hand like she was royalty. Dad mumbled something about seeing what they could do. Liam and I exchanged a glance. We'd heard this scene too many times before. After the plates were cleared, I walked my father to the garage. "Please don't drive it," I instructed. "Just start it once a week, 15 minutes. Keep the cover on. It's complicated with insurance." He rolled his eyes. "I know how to handle a car, Vanessa." But I wasn't convinced. As I kissed Liam goodnight that evening, a chill pressed down on me. I had no idea I had just left my dream in the most dangerous hands possible. London was a blur of late nights, stiff boardrooms, and endless cups of bitter coffee. I barely slept, but the work was exhilarating. By the second week, I knew our proposal was going to land. Marissa whispered that the senior partners were already talking about a new title for me. Vice President. I should have been floating on air. But back in my hotel room, my phone buzzed with strange texts from my mother. "We have a big surprise for you when you get home. You'll be so proud of us." I smiled at first, assuming she meant a family dinner, maybe balloons for Liam. Still, something about her wording made my stomach twist. 2 weeks later, I stepped off the plane in Austin, body aching from the flight but heart racing to see my car again. Ethan was waiting with a grin and a hug. Liam barreled into my arms, his backpack thumping against me. Everything felt right. Until we drove to San Antonio. The first thing I noticed as we pulled into my parents' driveway was the garage door yawning open. My father's old sedan sat inside. My mother's SUV too, but not the Challenger. My breath caught. I rushed to the front door, barely knocking before pushing it open. "Mom, Dad, where's my car?" Lorraine appeared with a too bright smile. "Vanessa, darling, welcome home. Don't look so serious." "Where is my car?" Gerald lowered his newspaper, his face pale. Madison strolled in behind them, sun-kissed, her hair lighter than before, a thin bracelet of seashells on her wrist. She looked smug. "Thanks to your car," my mother said slowly, her eyes gleaming. "Our daughter is finally living her dream." She held up Madison's phone. On the screen, an Instagram post flashed. Madison reclined on a yacht in the Caribbean, drink in hand, #paradise. The room tilted. "You sold my car?" I whispered. "Vanessa," my father began, his voice shaky. "Try to understand. Madison was falling behind her friends. Everyone else was going. She would have been devastated to miss out." "You make good money," my mother added briskly. "You can buy another. This was her chance." I stared at them, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "How much?" 45,000, my father muttered. My knees nearly buckled. "That car was worth almost 80. You didn't even research?" "The buyer said it was fair," my mother snapped. "We needed to move fast before you came home. It's just a car, Vanessa. Family matters more than metal." But in that moment, staring at Madison's smug smile and my parents' hollow excuses, I knew something inside me had cracked. And I wasn't sure it could ever be fixed. My hands trembled as I stared at Madison's vacation photos. She was laughing on deck chairs, clinking glasses, flashing designer sunglasses. All of it paid for by the one thing I had worked my entire adult life to achieve. I felt my throat tighten, heat rising in my chest. And then, unexpectedly, I started to laugh. First a low, breathless chuckle, then louder until both my parents were gaping at me in confusion. "What's so funny?" my mother snapped, her voice sharp. I wiped my eyes, steadying myself. "You think you sold my car?" Gerald frowned. "We saw you drive it here." "Don't lie, Vanessa. We handled the paperwork. The buyer wired the money. It's done." At that moment, the front door opened. Ethan stepped in, his brow furrowed. "Vanessa? Where's the Challenger?" I turned to him, my laughter breaking into a calm smile. "Tell them, Ethan." He folded his arms, his jaw tight. "You didn't sell her Challenger. You sold mine." The room froze. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. "The car you sold was my replica," Ethan said. "A 2003 custom build designed to look like a 1970 Dodge Challenger. Worth maybe 25,000 on a good day. Not Vanessa's original classic." Color drained from my mother's face. "No, that's impossible. It looked the same." "That's the point," Ethan said coldly. "From the outside, it's identical. But you forged a signature, took money you had no right to, and passed off a replica as an authentic classic. Do you realize what that means?" My father stammered. We thought—" "You thought wrong," Ethan cut in. "You committed fraud, grand theft, wire fraud if the payment went through electronically. Each of those can land you in prison for more than a decade." Madison finally spoke, her voice rising. "This is ridiculous. They were just trying to help me. No one's going to jail over a car." I spun on her, my voice sharp. "Over your vacation, Madison. Over your entitlement. They stole something that wasn't even mine to give. They sold Ethan's property." My phone buzzed, cutting through the tension. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With shaking hands, I answered. "Is this Vanessa Cooper?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Richard Collins. I just bought a 1970 Dodge Challenger from your parents. There's a problem with the title transfer. It doesn't match the VIN. What's going on here?" My parents' faces turned ashen. My mother whispered, "Oh my God." For the first time in years, they looked truly terrified. And I wasn't done making them face what they'd done. The silence in the room after I hung up the phone was heavier than any I had ever known. My parents stared at me, pale and wide-eyed, while Madison shifted uncomfortably as though she wanted to vanish into the wall. Ethan broke it first. "That was your buyer, wasn't it? He's already suspicious. You're out of time." "We didn't mean to commit a crime," my father muttered, his voice brittle. "We thought you forged my signature and sold property that wasn't even mine," I snapped. "Intent doesn't erase fraud. If Mr. Collins goes to the police, you're both looking at felony charges." My mother's bravado finally cracked. She pressed trembling fingers to her lips. Vanessa, please, you have to help us. I took a step closer, meeting her tearful eyes without flinching. No, you have to fix this. The next morning, Ethan and I sat in the downtown office of Alicia Ramirez, a criminal lawyer I knew from community networking events. She listened quietly as we explained everything: the forged paperwork, the incorrect VIN number, the wire transfer. When we finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. Your parents' actions fall under grand theft auto and wire fraud. In Texas, that's serious time. 15 years if prosecuted. They also put the buyer in the position of owning a vehicle he can't legally register. That makes him a victim. He could file charges tomorrow. My stomach clenched. I had wanted them to face consequences, but the image of my parents in prison uniforms made me dizzy. Is there another way? I asked. Alicia nodded slowly. If you can convince the buyer to return the car in exchange for a full refund plus compensation, and if your parents pay quickly, you might avoid law enforcement involvement. But it has to be immediate. Delay, and you lose control of the situation. When we drove back to San Antonio, my parents were waiting on the porch, haggard and desperate. Lorraine grabbed my hand. Please tell me you won't let them lock us up. We'll pay him back, I swear. $55,000, Ethan said flatly. 50 to cover the sale and 5 for damages. Wire it and we'll retrieve the car. Gerald shook his head. We don't have that kind of money sitting around. Then find it, I said coldly. Sell the jewelry. Take out a loan. And Madison, I turned to my sister, who had just walked up with her tan still glowing from her cruise. You're going to contribute too. You wanted luxury? Time to pay for it. Her jaw dropped. That's not fair. No, I said, my voice hard as steel. What's not fair is stealing the one thing I worked my life for. Now it's time all of you learned what consequences feel like. We gathered that evening in my apartment, the air thick with tension. My parents sat on this couch, Lorraine wringing her hands, Gerald staring at the floor. Madison leaned against the wall with her arms folded, eyes darting everywhere except toward me or Ethan. This is ridiculous, Madison muttered. I didn't sell anything. Why am I being punished? I turned on her, my voice low but sharp. You manipulated them. You whined about being left out. You made them believe your happiness was worth more than my property, more than my sacrifices. That makes you just as responsible. Madison's chin lifted. You've always been jealous because Mom and Dad love me more. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I let the silence stretch until even my parents looked up in shock. You think love is getting handed everything without earning it? I asked quietly. You're 25, Madison. Still leaning on them, still expecting them to fix your life. That's not love. That's dependence. And it's killing you. For once, she had no snappy reply. Gerald cleared his throat. Vanessa's right. His voice was hoarse but steady. We thought we were protecting you, Madison, but all we did was raise a daughter who doesn't know how to stand on her own 2 feet. My mother bristled. Gerald, no, Lorraine, he said firmly. We need to admit it. We spoiled her while pushing Vanessa to be the strong one. We told ourselves it was balance. But it wasn't. It was favoritism. And now it's blown up in all our faces. Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. We didn't mean to hurt you, Vanessa. We just thought... You thought wrong, I interrupted, my voice trembling but strong. You thought my boundaries didn't matter. You thought my work, my sacrifices, my dreams were yours to use. You were wrong. The room fell into silence again until Ethan placed a folder on the coffee table. Here's what's going to happen. You'll take out a home equity loan. Lorraine, you'll sell the jewelry. Madison, you'll contribute $10,000 from your savings. And you'll all sign this agreement, a notarized document acknowledging what you did and promising never to touch Vanessa's or my property again. Lorraine balked. A notarized document? That's extreme. Not as extreme as prison, Ethan shot back. Finally, with trembling hands, my parents signed. Madison scrawled her name last, her expression a mixture of resentment and fear. As I watched their pens scratch across the page, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in my life, they weren't dismissing me. They weren't excusing themselves. They were finally being held accountable. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a storm slowly losing its fury. My parents scrambled to secure a home equity loan. My mother sold 2 diamond rings she once flaunted at church gatherings. Madison, after 2 days of sulking, finally wired $10,000 from her account. Piece by piece, the money came together. Ethan and I met with Mr. Collins, the buyer, at a neutral location. His anger was sharp, but when the funds cleared into his account and he saw the notarized apology letter, his shoulders eased. "I should press charges," he said, eyeing my parents' signatures on the document. "But since I'm made whole, I'll let it go." Relief washed over me, though it was tempered by the knowledge of how close we had come to ruin. Ethan's replica Challenger was returned, not a scratch on it. And my true Challenger, the car I had bled and sweated for, remained safe in his friend's garage, untouched by betrayal. 1 month later, I found myself sitting at my parents' dinner table again, though nothing about it felt the same. My father's hands bore new calluses from extra construction work he had taken on. My mother's manicured nails were bare, her jewelry box noticeably emptier. Madison had started a new job at a downtown firm, entry-level, long hours, not glamorous. For once, she wasn't complaining. During dinner, Gerald cleared his throat. "I talked to Uncle Ray," he said quietly. "He's thinking about selling his old pickup. I thought, maybe I could buy it, fix it up, if you're willing to show me how." I looked at him, stunned. This was the man who once dismissed my grease-stained hands, now asking to learn from me. Something softened in my chest. "I'd like that," I said. After the meal, my mother pulled me aside. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I've apologized before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry, Vanessa. Not just for the car. For every time I dismissed your passions, every time I favored Madison. I see now what I've done." Her eyes were red-rimmed, but honest. For the first time, I believed her. As Ethan and I drove home, the Challenger's engine purring like a living thing, I reflected on what had happened. The car was still my treasure, but it had become something more. It was the spark that forced my family to face truths we'd avoided for decades. I rolled down the window, letting the Texas wind whip through my hair. Boundaries, I thought, aren't selfish. They're survival. Loving your family doesn't mean letting them take everything. It means standing firm so respect can grow. Maybe, just maybe, my family had finally started to learn that lesson.